There we go.
There we
Uh,
go.
we're getting there. We're doing the best we can with the little brain cells we have at this point.
Yeah,
I,
no kidding.
I understand, not a problem.
So I'm
So,
loving the background, by the way. Sorry, Dad.
yes,
Oh, sorry, yeah. It's the cover of the book. I don't
I
know.
know.
Yeah.
I saw the covering in the background because we actually used it on our last podcast, trying to get people to tune in for this, which we're going to be releasing as a kind of an updated special edition. Because when we got to doing Maine, the whole idea behind this podcast originally was just every state in New England, and now we've expanded out to the country, has so many legends of ghosts and cryptids and aliens, and there's so much going on that we thought it'd be fun to kind of highlight a few from every state. And it was just fortuitous. We were working on Maine, and we actually had come up with the Nelly Butler haunting, and then
Oh, yeah.
Megan says, "Wait, I don't want to do this because I have a line on this author who actually did this book called The Gathering Room." So, if you could walk us a little bit through the Nelly Butler story, or as much as you're willing to give us, because we don't want to take away from the book itself.
Yeah, that's all right. When I first started this, I didn't really want to share too much of the history with people because I was like, no, read the book, read the book. But the history itself is so fascinating that I always tell people, if this story fascinates you, please read my book first so that you get the magic. Because that's what historical fiction is. It's energized and emotional and fluffed up history. But please, after you have read my book, please do follow up with the actual history. So the Nelly Butler hauntings, the ghost of Nelly Butler actually appeared late in 1799 and then again in 1800. And it's considered the first documented ghost sighting in America. And because of that, it gets a little more attention sometimes than other ghost stories. And what makes it documented is that 20 years after the sighting of the ghost, so in about 1819, two of the men that were involved in the sighting of the ghost, one filed charges against the other within the church, which, the church in the center of religion was the center of the community during that time period. And so Abner Blaisdell filed charges against George Butler that he wanted George kicked out of the church. And that drew in the authorities, who then needed to take testimonies and depositions of, what was the argument between these two men. And it stemmed back to this appearance of George Butler's first wife. Her name was Nelly. And the appearance of her ghost, which had appeared in the basement of Abner Blaisdell's house and informed the entire community that Abner's daughter Lydia needed to marry George. So because of that, because of these charges, religious leaders came, took the testimonies. The testimonies were all written down, and then it drops into the historical record. And so that's what makes it the first documented ghost sighting in America, because we know people have probably been talking about spirits and ghosts for a millennium. Cavemen were probably going, did you see that shadow I just saw back there? This is just something that people find fascinating to begin with, the unknown.
Right.
But this story in particular. So one of the cool things that happened to me today when I was down in Sullivan with the television crew was that I actually got to hold the original documents from 1819 where Abner filed the charges against George. So posted that on Facebook tonight.
That's kind of fascinating. It's always interesting to me when something like a ghost story enters a historical record.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. And this one in particular, the church in Sullivan actually had to dissolve and reform a few years later, because it had caused such a turmoil amongst the people in the community as well as in that particular congregation on whether this was actually a true manifestation of God or whether this was a hoax or whether it was something demonic. The jury's still out. It has never been solved on what it was. Whether Lydia was, because she was we would say she was a child, but in that time period she wasn't. Was she drawing a poltergeist? Did she have clairvoyant or medium skills? Anything of that nature. that nobody knows. Nobody knows for certain why this happened the way it did.
If it was a hoax, though, think about how elaborately done that would have had to have been.
That's the thing for that time period, because you have to remember the ghost appeared in late 1799, early
Right.
1800. So there's no electricity, there's no lights, there's no tricks, and the ghost appeared in the basement of the Blaisdell's home, which I actually got to see the cellar hole today, so that was also pretty cool. But these are hand dug basements that are lined with field stones. They're not elaborate, they're not finished off, there's no bar in the corner. So to have people, and up to about 36 people, gathered in the basement waiting to see this ghost, and when it appeared, it would appear as an orb, iridescent and twinkling, and there would be knockings on the walls, voices being heard coming from around the room. When people questioned what they were seeing, then the orb would turn into the shape of a woman. So, I mean, all of these things would have been absolutely impossible to perpetrate as a hoax in a hand-dug basement in the coast of Maine in 1800. Yeah.
Right.
So just a little background. I don't know if you know this, but Megan and I were both from Rhode Island, born and bred in Rhode Island. And we've had a fair experience with the older homes of New England. And I mean, they're already drafty, they're already dank, they're already dark. Yeah. They give you all the vibes anyways. I do like the idea that you pulled up, which is interesting to me. What if Lydia was the manifester of this herself as a poltergeist? I had just had a conversation actually with my mother-in-law over the weekend while we were in Seattle, about the idea of poltergeist, what poltergeists are versus what a haunting is. And I think that would be fascinating. Well, because,
What?
First of all, I was in Seattle, Washington. I mean, really, I was in Olympia, Washington. So, I was out looking for the greatest hopscotch champion of the universe.
Right.
Of course.
But so, I find that to be interesting. So this is the first documented ghost haunting in American history, correct?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, documented. Like I said, I'm sure somebody had something moving the closet door on their china cabinet, or something. But as far as first documented that dropped into the historical record, this is it. Yeah.
Very cool.
But as this is not quite related to Nelly Butler, but interesting all at the same time. That's the first documented ghost sighting story, whatever you want to call it. I saw something the other day, an article that was published about a shop owner in Pennsylvania. In 2023, got accused of witchcraft and summoning spirits. So you have the first documented and the most recent documented.
The most recent, right? Yeah.
Apparently, witchcraft is illegal in Pennsylvania, for all who are wondering.
Even to this day.
To this day, yeah. Yes, I thought that was super funny. I saw that on Instagram and looked it up later, and I was like, oh, look at that. So I thought that was delightfully ironic that I saw that this morning when we were looking up, oldest.
Well, the interesting thing about Nelly's story and how dramatically it tore the town apart is that continued for many years, almost to this current time period as well. About 100 years after the appearance of the ghost, a reporter from southern Maine down near Portland, which I'm sure you're familiar with, came across this story. And so he came up to Sullivan and he started poking around and he wanted, so tell me, what do you know about this ghost? You guys had this ghost story in town. And the people coalesced very quickly and were like, nope, that didn't happen here. Nope, take your little body and go away. And he continued to investigate until finally someone said to him, no, Abner Blaisdell didn't live here. He lived in Machiasport, which is further east than Sullivan. And so that sent that reporter off into Machiasport to try to find evidence of it. And to this day, if you Google Abner Blaisdell, usually high up in the Google search, it will tell you he's from Machiasport, and he's not. So that continued to live on for about another 100 years until 2010, when a professor from the University of Maine named Marcus Labrizzi, who lives in Machiasport, came across this, and he started doing the research, and he himself found that Abner didn't live in Machiasport, and Marcus was the one that traced it back to Sullivan. and found the actual legit documents, the original documents, sitting right there in the Sullivan Historical Society. And so Marcus actually wrote the book, the nonfiction book called The Documentary History of the Nelly Butler Hauntings. And it's really interesting because if you buy my book on Amazon, it actually recommends that you purchase Marcus's book as well, which I highly recommend. Like I said, read mine first so you get the magic, but then read Marcus's so you know the truth. But even now, even today, when I was down there, there's still, you know, we're 200 years later, and there's still a segment of the population that doesn't want, no, we don't need all that attention here, you know.
That's so
Right.
interesting.
I wonder why. I mean, because one of the things, again, when we were doing Maine, we were looking at, you know, Maine is, how to put this, Maine is a little bit more away from the spotlight. You know what I mean? It has its tourist areas. I've been to Maine a number of times, particularly up in the Algonquin, Kennebunk areas of Maine. But, you know, like finding, like, if you go to Frederick, Maryland, there's 3 ghost tours in Frederick, Maryland. If you go to Washington, D.C., there's about 27. If you go to St. Augustine, Florida, there's about 483. In Maine, you are hard pressed to find somebody who will actually talk to you about this stuff. And I wonder if it's just that reserved New England soul, or if it's you know, it's like, no, this is a real thing, so we don't need the attention here.
Yeah, we don't talk about this. We just keep it amongst ourselves. It was really fascinating. Literally just 5 minutes ago, before I started this with you, I received a message on Facebook from a woman I don't know, who had seen my post that was shared by the town of Sullivan. And she immediately reached out to me and was telling me her experiences of being in this particular cemetery that I was in today, and how she felt she had come in contact with the spirits of some of these Blaisdells that had participated in these events. And, you know, I mean, I think that's the case. You know, I think maybe it's too real for us up here, and we all have these experiences. That's what I've seen in the year since I started this journey. No matter where I go and where I speak in public, everyone has to tell me their ghost story, and you know, and they're all very, very similar. It depends on people's cultural background, their religious background, or their education. They're all using different words, but they're all explaining to me pretty much the exact same thing, which I find very, very fascinating. So, you know, I've come to realize that, at least here in Maine, we're all having some level of supernatural experience on a regular basis. And maybe that's why none of us want to talk about it.
Well,
Really, it's not the attention of the people they're afraid of. They don't want that ghost attention on them. Which,
yeah, definitely.
Valid.
I am. Yeah,
I understand.
Having had a couple of oddity experiences of our own in a specific house that we had access to in Rhode Island, I can absolutely say that could be the case, as people are like, yeah, you know what, I'm good, thanks.
I'm gonna keep this to myself, and I'm not gonna tell anybody. A, because I don't want anybody to think I'm crazy, but B, because I don't want it to happen again.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. That's definitely an interesting thing. I also loved, so I kind of perused through New England's magazine, the Yankee magazine, that had a little bit of the story of Nelly Butler in it. And I loved how there was a line in it that says that the Reverend Cummings was a disbeliever in ghosts and didn't believe his flock should be believers in ghosts until he saw it. And then all of a sudden it was a lot of like, moments in his life.
Yeah, you know, and I've had my similar experience. You know, I tell everyone I wasn't a real big believer in the paranormal. I didn't dabble in the mystical arts, or, you know, crystals or any of those things. I just an amateur historian who came across Marcus's book in 2015 when I was looking for something to read one Halloween, and I just became absolutely obsessed with this piece of Maine history that I didn't know anything about. And but the historical record is incredibly dry, and I literally woke up in the middle of the night one night and said, well, I'll just write what I think happened. And so I actually fictionalized it for my own entertainment. That was originally how this started. But since then, you know, I myself now have had experiences that, you know, I now say I am staunchly in the category of the believer, whereas I wasn't before.
Yeah, it's interesting. There are some people who use that term, the believer and the knower. I've had this experience. And one of the things that I say a lot throughout our casts is, I'm not willing to look at the 10,000 plus people who have spoken on a subject and tell them, no, you're all wrong. you know
Right.
it is an experience that you have had, and it is something that is undeniable, and undeniable for you anyways. And then my other challenge to people who are the disbelievers is, okay, now I'll give you that opportunity. Go into the same area that they were and spend the amount of time they did. Are you couch surfing this, or are you actually out in the woods, so to speak, on the subject? And you find very quickly people don't want to actually follow in that. I will say I also read a great many reviews of The Gathering Room, just because I was trying to get a feel for how the book flowed itself. And people really are just raving over the warmth of uh, the story itself, the warmth that you gave it. And I believe one actually said springs to life off of the pages, which, by the way, I don't know if that was a paid person or not, but you should
No.
really contact them.
Yeah, no,
It was the
no,
best
yeah,
review I've ever read.
yeah, no, and let me start that immediately by saying I have not paid for a single
I'm
review.
kidding.
Those are all I know. But I actually did. I actually had someone tagged me in a post on Facebook yesterday, and they're starting out. They got their page and they're going to review main books, and they decided to start with mine. And when I went to their website, it said right on there, that they get, if you click through to any of these affiliated links, I get a commission, and my website was one of them. And so I reached right out to them and I said, excuse me, but how are you
How?
getting paid from linking my website to yours? And the person made it abundantly clear that they weren't. It was bookshop.org or something that was also on their website. But they thanked me for pointing that out, because they too did not want anyone to think that they were getting paid to write these reviews. They wanted honest reviews. So they have since altered that on their website. So yeah, that's, again, I wrote this for my own entertainment. I was the advertising manager for the Maine Tourism Association. I was just working my job, and wrote this and figured we'd, do this so I could tell the kids, look, your mother published a book, kind of thing. The reviews have blown me away, absolutely blown me away, because like you said, people are absolutely gravitated to the story. The ones that always get me is, I sat down, I was just going to read a chapter, and now it's 1 o'clock in the morning and I'm still reading, or
Right. There are a great many
I
cannot put this book down reviews.
yeah, a lot.
I'm so sorry to interrupt. I was just
No, that's okay.
I read part of it. I haven't finished it yet. I have a lot of books I need to read. Okay, a lot of.
That's okay. It's not required to be my friend to read the book.
But I wanted to read it. I was curious about the book. Okay, so I was like, all right, let me read it. And I'm never very far from a reading device of some variant. But I think the way, particularly the way it's not, it doesn't scare me, which is great, because I am absolutely fascinated by ghost stories. I think they're super interesting. But if I'm reading like a fictionalized version of a ghost story and it's designed to, scare the crap out of me, I'm like, I'm good. Thank you. So I really enjoyed the fact that it was not like terrifying, I could read it and enjoy it without being like, so
a lot of times when I'm out speaking to people, and I say, oh, look, I wrote this book based on the first documented ghost sighting, people go, oh, no, I don't read that. I don't read scary things. And I frequently say to them, it's not scary. I wrote a story about a ghost story.
Right.
I'm not Stephen King. I didn't write gory horror, or anything like that. Now, is it twisty? Yes. Does the plot twist several times so you don't know where it's going? Yes. Is it compelling? Absolutely. But yeah, I don't think it's scary. And I've really only met a couple people who have told me that it was. I met a woman at a book club the other night where I spoke, and she's, everybody was talking about how they didn't think it was scary, and she spoke right up. She went, I thought it was scary. It's like, well, I'm really sorry.
I'm so sorry.
So sorry. Didn't mean for it.
I didn't think it was scary.
I actually appreciate ghost stories that are designed to tell a story and not to just be, as a child, I very much appreciated Stephen King's writing because I was a kid and I enjoyed it. But I enjoy the writing that
No.
is around the ghost story that makes it it's just a story. The ghost just
Right.
happens to be a character within the story. Now, the fact that this happens to be a true story makes it even, kind of
Well,
cooler.
and I think that that's exactly what I was going for, despite the fact that I was only writing it for myself, was, Nelly Butler's story is everywhere. Like you said, it's on the internet. You found it in Down East Magazine. Um, you know, you can Google the Nelly Butler hauntings and pretty much get an idea of what happened. But I just felt, the relationships between George and Lydia and Nellie were not well defined in the historical record. And that's really the piece that I was going for. What did these people feel when they went through this? What were their emotions? What were their reactions? And, I started out thinking I was going to be writing a story about Nellie's ghost, but in the end, I realized what I wrote actually is a story about George and Lydia.
Right.
And really what they went through. Nellie almost plays the secondary character in the book.
Well, it's just I don't know how to phrase this quite properly. Nellie doesn't seem like in the beginning we were discussing how we don't know if it's a true haunting, a poltergeist type situation, or a very elaborate hoax. But she doesn't seem to be like, I can't pronounce the word correctly, so I'm not going to try. She doesn't seem to be like mean, like she doesn't seem to be a poltergeist. She shows up in front of these crowds of people who are, there to kind of like spectate at her and see what's going on, but she doesn't it's not like some of the other hauntings where you're like, oh, people are like, they feel like they're being choked or they're like bleeding out their ears,
right? Yeah,
like,
she didn't come with any malevolent
that's
purpose. Sorry, I'm writer. She she came with a very love-centered purpose, right, if you want to look at it in that sense. And I think that's some of the reasons why some of the people in the community felt that this was a being from God, and an angel, somebody working on God's mission, whatever their religious persuasion was at that time, because she did come with a message of love and hope and
right,
and happiness for people. So that may have been part of it. It's funny, in talking with people, I've had so many people ask me, why would she have done that? Given the fact that what I created about the relationship between Lydia and Nellie in the book is fictional. We don't really know much about their relationship in real life.
right.
But why Lydia? Why would Nellie have done that? And and then I've actually sat at book clubs and watched them wander off in the philosophical weeds, getting into the deeper meaning of God knows things that we don't understand, and there had to have been a purpose for this. And and it's just really fascinating, because I sit there and I go, hello, wrote it for my own entertainment.
Right.
Let's not think too deeply into this, okay, shall we? But yeah, I mean,
they're just blue. It's all right.
yeah, right. I maybe we'll never know. Maybe we'll never know what that purpose was, for why these three people found themselves in that situation. Was it a test for George? I mean, you think about George, he went on to marry again. Okay, so
Right.
now he's on his third wife, and his first two wives have died in childbirth. When his third wife tells him she's pregnant, what the world did he think?
Oh,
like,
crap.
Oh, a lot of panic.
Is this gonna happen again? So one of the individuals that I got to spend the day with today, while I was with the film crew, is actually the fourth great grandson of George Butler. And so
Wow.
yeah, I know. You got to go to my Facebook page, because all the pictures are there. So,
no, like hidden journals or anything. Like,
yeah,
come on.
Yeah, no. In fact, he didn't even realize that. I mean, obviously, he knew he was a butler, but he didn't realize the connection between his family and the Nelly Butler haunting until his kids were taught the story in school, and they came home and they said to him, hey, Dad, we learned this really cool ghost story about Nelly Butler. And he went, Nelly Butler? And he went back and checked his family history, and he found the connection with George, because obviously he's descended from George's third wife. And and then he began researching and learning all he could about this haunting. And then he and I actually only met in July when he became aware of my book. And so we met in person in July, and he read the book, and he just absolutely loved it. And he posted something on Facebook a few days ago, but then reiterated it to me again today, that he says, thank you so much for shining this light on my family's history. I mean, and that's pretty cool when you sit here as a writer and think you did that. So, yeah, look what I did. No.
Interesting.
Sure, there was no hidden journals, because
yeah, no hidden journals.
that would be
sorry.
really cool.
Yeah. I will say this though: the Sullivan Historical Society has all the original documents. They have the original documents from the charges that Abner filed against George. They have ongoing, I mean, these families never stopped. I was at an event the other day, and I saw a man that had a t-shirt that said the Hatfields and the McCoys on it, and I was like, oh, I got that Maine version going on at home. Because the Blaisdells and the Butlers continued to battle each other out and have animosity between the two families for multiple generations afterwards. Sadly.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of nuts. And here's the thing, unless I've misread, that was it. That was the end of the haunting. There was no, not like in 1928, somebody wandering through the old Butler house and poof, there she is. No,
I mean, there's sporadic stories here and there. I actually heard some of them mentioned today when we were all together, that she appeared in other places around the bay and other locations and everything. But again, we're dealing with history, and so, how much of it is actually accurate? Did people just jump on the bandwagon? Oh,
correct.
I saw her at my house, that kind of thing. So I think, I think the ghost, the spirit, the specter, whatever you want to call her, I think she had a specific purpose. And
right.
She came and she executed that specific purpose. And once her work was done, I really do feel that was the end of it. And right. I don't feel that any of the other sightings that are spoken of were probably accurate. She had a very, very specific purpose, and she only appeared for one reason and one reason only. So
right.
That's interesting. I don't know too many other ghost stories that have that specific, that kind of specificity.
There we go.
Actually was. Yes, I know. Yes, young lady.
Thank you. There is another ghost story I can think of with that type of purpose. Actually, she solved her own murder. She's the only ghost to have ever been documented to solve her own murder. It is in a police record somewhere. I will pull it up for you.
Ooh,
her husband had broken her neck, and she appeared to her mother, and her neck was twisting and twisting and twisting, and the mom insisted that her daughter's body be dug up and examined, because I guess for the funeral they had stuck her in a stiff neck dress and buried her so nobody could tell. And then once the body was dug up and the sheriff confirmed her neck had been broken and the husband was charged, she never appeared again.
That's fascinating.
Insane.
I will find the name because I have forgotten it, but literally
please do. I'd like to add that to the ending of this or the beginning of next week's, because that's an interesting story that I was not aware of.
Well, I mean, there are certain ghosts that seem to appear for a reason, but then
yeah.
For in Nelly's case, and I would say that she's not a poltergeist, she's not a haunting specific. It's more of a message. It's not really a message from who, I don't know, but
my favorite part of the whole Nelly Butler haunting is when she appeared and she spoke. The very first words she'd speak were, "I am one who speaks from the wilderness. I come with a message from God."
Well, that's
there we go. That's
very Mark.
Very specific.
Very Mark 3 going on there.
Yeah. So
voice crying out from the wilderness.
Right.
Make way the way of the Lord.
Right. So she. And it wasn't just one person that heard her say that. That's the thing. You read the original records, you read Marcus Labrizzi's book, there are 36 different testimonies in there. And every single one of those people described pretty much the same thing. And yet they were people that were on opposite sides. There were, some people that were in this is a God thing, and no, this is a hoax thing, and the Blaisdells are awful, but yet both sides saw the same
Same.
thing and heard the same thing. Yeah.
You're right. I actually remember hearing somebody trying to debunk paranormal experiences, saying, well, if they expect to see a ghost, this is what they all see, and therefore it is, it's a hoax because, or they're all mistaken because. And it's like, well, if I go in the woods and I go to look for a bear, and a bear looks like a bear, it's a bear. It's not a
It's a bear.
hoax, right?
Right.
And I
Yeah.
kind of feel the same way. It's sort of going back to that thing. I'm not willing to look at 36 people who are willing to commit themselves on record saying that they saw this thing. And and especially at a time where it could go from that's demonic to witchcraft to you're crazy, and you could become ousted from the town. I mean, in this day and age, they might just call it Tuesday evening, but
Right. Yeah.
even 50 years ago, if you said something like that, you could lose your livelihood within
Yeah.
moments or days, and be
Right.
thrown from your church and your community.
Yeah.
So as we end towards our time together, a couple of quick things. Where can people find you to get a copy of this fantastic novel, myself
Well, the
included?
book, yeah, the book is available on Amazon in both paperback and Kindle, so you can order it there. If you'd like a signed copy, you can order it from my website, which is mshoreswriter.com. It's available in 72 different retail locations across the state of Maine. We are working on getting it in other places. Books A Million now carries it. I don't know if Books A Million is outside of Maine. It's a big corporate
Yes.
bookstore, but yeah, so Books A Million carries it, so you could probably get it there as well. But definitely available on Amazon. You can follow me on Facebook at mshoreswriter, or Instagram, TikTok, and also X at mshoreswriter. I kind of
Formerly known as Twitter.
Yeah, yeah, formerly known as Twitter. Yeah. And I am working on the prequel right now, so that's an interesting topic, that how that all came about. So
Interesting. Well, we'll have to catch up with that.
yeah, because it follows the Blaisdell family, or traces the Blaisdell family back to their origins in England, and starts in 1433. So
Whoa.
it's pretty fascinating bit of history associated with Lydia's family, and will ultimately explain maybe the reason why Lydia found herself stuck in the middle of the first documented ghost sighting in America.
Oh, well, that's a teaser.
I just say, now we gotta know.
I know.
What do you mean?
I feel like I just finished the end of a series of books, and they're like, and the adventure will continue in the.
Yeah, right, really.
I gotta wait another year.
Yeah, no, well, we're hoping to have that out by next summer. That's the goal. So, and I also write a blog every Friday on my website. You can subscribe on my website. I don't sell email addresses, and I never send anything else but the blog. So if you like my style of writing and you want something to keep reading until the next one comes out, I do write every Friday. So
excellent. Well, Michelle Shores, thank you so much for your time this evening, and thank you for dealing with the craziness of the startup of this as I return from the airport.
Thank you, so guys. Thank you so much for reaching out.
Yes. Well, it's an excellent story, and I look forward to catching up with you sometime in the future.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.